Morning, everybody. Good morning, Evelina. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. I'm going to start recording this to the cloud.
Uh, it it says that I can't start the video because the host has stopped it. Is it me or you?
Probably me. Let me see. All right, let's try that. See if that helps you out there.
Yep.
There you are. Hi, Evelina.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Let's see. I guess we're recording. We're on YouTube, so we're good to go. Yeah, I'm hanging out here in Snoqualmie Valley. I'm looking to the north here, a little bit different location than I am sometimes, and I can see these beautiful willow trees fully leafed out, a maple's fully leafed out, a cherry's got a little bit of cherry blossom still. Some nice big Doug firs out there, very tall Doug firs. I think most of the Doug firs around here are just so tall, and a little bit of blue sky with some clouds. It's nice. It's nice to be here. How's everything where you are?
Good. Things are greening up as well. Maybe a little slower than that in your neck of the woods. But yeah, the rivers are swelling up and breaching the banks and going all over the place, and it's nice to see and nice to hear them. But yeah, everything's going well.
Well, great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, and it's perfect that here we are in the springtime, moving towards summer, and the snow maybe is starting to melt in certain areas, certain parts, lower elevations at least. The waterways are filling with water. The rivers are flowing up. The streams are flowing. Here it's pretty green, like I said, and what a perfect background for our little chat today, which is all about water, or is about water at least. And yeah, when we think about the complexity of the world these days and the challenges we face, as global, local, all around, water very quickly comes to the forefront. And yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to have a healthy relationship with the planet and with each other going forward unless we can figure out our relationship with water. Um, so I know this is a part of the challenge where you live and a part of what's going on with Wild Cooperative. And so I wanted to chat with you today about that, some if you're up for that.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Where would you like me to start?
Yeah, well, could you just do another little summary of Wild Cooperative? Because I know some people saw the little interview we did a couple weeks ago, but yeah, like tell us a little bit about Wild Cooperative, and it doesn't have to be super long, but yeah, just like what's going on there, what are you and your partner up to, what's the bigger picture part of Wild Cooperative?
So we're a community of off-grid homesteaders, I guess, that are stewarding the land, and the land is at the western foothills of the Rocky Mountains, right in between the beautiful high mountains and the desert of the Colorado Plateau. And we also have regenerative living skills schools and demonstration sites. So basically, I mean, it all stems from just experiential um, learning and also sharing these experiences with others at the school and hosting certain certain workshops that are, letting us kind of transition from this human-centric perspective to and more of a biocentric perspective of living on this planet and in general in this universe, I guess. um, yeah, so that was our premise. We're not really for land ownership and water ownership. We just it's really hard to be able to be on the land without the insecurity of some human rights, basically deciding whether you can be there or not. So we entered that play and decided to purchase and steward this land but allow others to take advantage of what is offered here, but also, learn how to take responsibility to care for the land.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I hear about what you're doing, and I hear about similar projects around the world, for me, it really gives me hope. I mean, it's one of the few things that I think really can give us hope at this time, and that there are people, individuals, communities that are working together. And I love that idea of a more biocentric relationship. That putting life first, and our relationship with the world around us first. Very different than sort of the consumer driven, extractive model that's just going around. And relating to some of the bigger themes I teach about, our survival skills and our ancestral skills, is like, this extractive, massive growth-based system is a relatively new phenomenon in the course of humanity, though, we can make a lot of arguments about that. But it's also clear that it's one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge we face in the 21st century. And that can relate to food, that can relate to precious metals being pulled out of the earth. It can relate to fossil fuels. There's all these substances that we have this intense relationship with now to keep our world going the way it is. And it's just fun to talk to and connect with people who are making different choices, or are leading some of the movement away from that heavily consumer-based, consumption-based, extractive-based world and mindset. Some people might call that the colonial mindset. There's all sorts of names for that. Like I'm hoping soon that I'm going to be able to write some about this mindset, and do some blogging about it, because I haven't blogged for a while. But really, I think, if I look at my life's work, it's really about trying to help people get out of that mindset and discover a new mindset, and lead a different life. And at the, one of those key foundational relationships that I work with people on is about, survival skills. And, people, when they think about survival skills, immediately think of like making fire, finding food, or potentially, if they expand a little bit, they're like, oh yeah, shelter's good, because, it gets cold or wet or hot or dry, whatever. But it's rare that people really think about water, and, how important it is, and how going forward, it could be like the most important relationship for all of us. And so I'm curious, could you tell us, Evelyn, a little bit about the situation, the big picture for you all out at Wild Cooperative around water, and what's going on there, and how you're navigating that?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I definitely resonate with what you're saying, as far as the kind of relearning these skills of being connected to everything around us, and seeing everything as a living being, living elements. And it's something that's in us, and we kind of took a turn at some point not that long ago, and I think it's still in us. We still have that innate kind of knowledge of how to interact with it, and water. Yeah, like you said, I mean, just like maybe with electricity, we kind of just turn on the tap, and there it is. But if you ever went on backpacking trips in the West, it's really sometimes like that's the main focus. and it is it I don't think it's the issue of the West anymore. There's definitely a lot of, even if the water is abundant, the issue of maybe the cleanliness or the quality of the water is also coming up. So I think it's definitely a global issue. But here we've been in a drought for a very long time, and the drought could be represented in many ways, and it's not just as an agricultural aspect, but definitely us with technology being able to tap into deep aquifers and drawing into it, and not allowing for the water to recharge, so removing some of the ecosystems like beaver habitats and all the other animals and plants that are allowing for the water to recharge, and changing the geology of the earth. but also, the mineralization. I don't know if you ever traveled through the West, but sometimes it looks like it's snowed, and it's the mineral deposits. There's a layer of crust on the soil where the water evaporates, and leaves a lot of the minerals that used to be underground. And then also, the temperatures of the water are changing. The mountain creeks, and that affects a lot the habitat of everything that lives in the water and around the water. So not just the minerals that are accumulating, and being washed out from the fields that are being irrigated into the creeks, but also the temperature of the water that affects the breeding the habitat, and just, the animals that need a certain levels of certain minerals, and the temperatures to be able to thrive.
Yeah. Well, where I live, I mean, I have lived in Arizona, and I've certainly traveled through the American West in multiple locations. My parents and I used to go to Montana quite a bit when I was growing up, so I'm definitely familiar with the arid nature of the West, and the critical nature of some of the water issues. And this is going on like right now, like how relevant this is. That I think it was just yesterday or the day before, there was this massive thing happened in Southern California where they're literally cutting off people's ability to water their lawns, and it's causing a lot of controversy. And it's sort of like, well, like let's get our brains wrapped around this. Like, this is water that, like, we need to drink, and or grow food with. Why are we using it to grow lawns? And people might say, oh, like, it's really easy for me where I sit up here in the Pacific Northwest, like, oh, this isn't a big issue. And that would be really a vast oversimplification of the situation up here, because yes, I live in one of the greenest, wettest places in the lower 48. And over the last 10 years, there's been multiple big issues around water, including when you said temperature change. That is a huge issue here because of the salmon. And that the salmon really can't handle the warm waters. They need cool, deep, shady pools in order to spawn. And so, like, there's massive changes that have happened in the salmon populations here, in part due to water temperature, but a lot of other things, water dams, and hydroelectric power. And then, like, if we're not using hydroelectric power here, though, then it's like, well, we're actually using more coal. And so when we remove these dams, are we going to then just burn more coal? And it gets really complicated quite fast. I live in a river valley. There's this valley is literally defined by two major river systems. Like, the community I live in, it's like right at the intersection of the Tolt River and the Snoqualmie River. And even just watching how they change, with time is drastic. And there's this phenomenon similar to what you were talking about with the mineralization, Evelina. Another thing that people have noticed is this, the changing of rivers from blue to green to brown. And this is related to the amount of water flow. This is related to erosion. This is related to the temperatures, the sun, the amount of sunlight, and the growth of algae. And we have definitely had a shift towards more green and brown rivers and less blue or clear rivers where we live, just in the last 10 years. And a lot of people won't realize this, is that where I live, it's actually really common. Our summers are actually drought conditions. We often don't get very much rain at all in July, August, and even part of September, sometimes most of September. And so the plants here need to be both really rain tolerant and drought tolerant, because we'll actually get such little water. But when people are working with caching water or doing rain barrels and things here, normally there's plenty to go around and get you through the summer. In the last few summers, it's not even close, and then people are using water from the tap, and then we're getting into, like, groundwater issues. And one of the more interesting things I'd heard about this whole issue with groundwater too, and I don't know enough about the science around this. I'm gonna have to learn some more about this, but there seems to be a correlation between depletion of groundwater an increase of drought and a lessening of rain. And it's speculated that there's some level of water vapor and water evaporation that occurs from groundwater that actually helps it rain. And so there's this kind of feedback system that as there's less rain, people are tapping more into the groundwater, and then there's less groundwater, then there's less evaporation and less rain, so that we have a pretty intense feedback loop that can happen pretty quickly. I'm curious about where you live. What are the major water systems, and how are they doing? Like, what's their kind of their status?
So I think the major concern right now is one of the laws that was enacted in 1920s, and that's the Colorado River Compact. And that was an act between areas of the West that basically divided the Colorado River between upper basin and lower basin. And the premise was, really good. It's like, we want to make sure that the water gets to where it was getting, which is the ocean eventually by Mexico. And that the states in between and the areas in between get the water that historically flown there. But that was in 1920s, and the climate was very different then. We had a lot of rain comparing to what we're getting now. And the upper basin states that where the Colorado River originates and is basically depleted. And the compact is not being met for the first time in a few years. So I don't know if you've seen pictures from Lake Mead and Powell and all these dammed lakes that, basically either are used for creation of power, electric power, or, for agriculture, and creating habitats in places maybe, where people never lived full time a whole year. So yeah, that it's an issue. I think it's always been an issue, but it's an issue because we created certain laws and they're not flexible. They're not alive. They're not like the river. The river never stays in the channel, right? I mean, it's never a concrete canal, where the river flows from one end to the other. It's a living being, and our laws are often very rigid. And even if they're maybe coming from some common sense idea, but oftentimes they're just kind of perpetuating this idea of a society that we have, that we talked about earlier, kind of just focusing on human benefits and downfalls.
Yeah. And when I lived in Arizona, it was almost, it's like 20 years ago now, and it was a time of drought. And then I think things got better for a few years, and now there's been an intensification of drought again. But when I lived there, what you're talking about with the Colorado River really resonates, because Tucson at the time was still using mostly groundwater, but they were starting to tap into Colorado River water, which is the primary source of water for Phoenix. And they had started to run out of the groundwater. And when we're talking about like this impact and, not realizing the impact, Tucson as a city had sunk 6 feet from the depletion of groundwater, so that the elevation had actually gone down. And there used to be 2 rivers that would run year round in Tucson, like the Tohono O'odham, the traditional people whose lands it is. They had these 2 rivers, and they lived very close to the rivers, and they interacted with the rivers in the Tucson area. And so you can imagine in the desert, it's very hot, very dry. But if you have these lush river riparian areas, you can talk about where people can live. They were able to live and had a seasonal agriculture and hunting and gathering because of these 2 rivers. And when I was there, it had been, unless it was a flash flood, there was never water in the rivers, and it hadn't been there for like 15 years. And I'm sure there's no water there now. And so, yeah, we're looking at, within a single human lifetime, altering the landscape such that places that were habitable are not no longer becoming habitable or inhabitable. And yeah, if I remember correctly too, I thought some of the Colorado River was actually going all the way from Arizona to California. Like it was being shipped over to California. And so again, this is where it was like the people at the very end of the river were like, hey, we need some water here. Like this is a river that we irrigate with and that, naturally flows into the ocean and stuff. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, so it happens here in Colorado as well. There's a continental divide that goes across the Rockies or along the Rockies, and everything on the west goes to, the west side, and everything on the east goes to the east side. So on the east side of the Rockies, there's a huge development. We call it the Front Range, but I mean, it's just a sprawling suburbia from, Wyoming all the way to New Mexico, pretty much. And they need more water for development, right? So what they're doing is they're creating channels and pipes to basically move the water from the west side of the divide back to the east side of the divide to be able to feed their demands. So yeah, it's happening all around here, and I guess it's multiplied, or it's really uh, becoming more and more apparent in the western states, but I think it's going to happen all around. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I remember too that, some of the things that people talked about when I was living in Arizona, well, we were, part of is like this whole idea of like xeriscaping, like having your landscape be a desert landscape and really trying to get away from this notion of having like green grasses and plants growing in your yard, based off the water demand, and then like, prioritizing water for, well, human use to actually, drink, and then also for agriculture. Well, I'm curious. I know Wild Cooperative has been on a journey with accessing your use of water, and where that journey is at, and what kind of support, if anything, can people give or help with.
Thank you. Yeah, so in 2018, we were offered these like elusive water rights from our creek that goes through the land that we're stewarding, and we thought it was such a simple thing. And then we learned so much more than I ever wanted to know about the water laws in Colorado. And it became a really convoluted project with hiring water engineers and talking to multiple lawyers. And but yeah, basically what we're trying to do is move the water upstream from one area where the water is no longer being used. For 30 years, the water is from 1800s, I mean, the water is from millennia, of course, but the water right, the White Water Law established this water as irrigation water in the 1800s. And so and anybody from the West knows that the time when the government decided that this water is appropriated for some use is really important. So we're trying to reinstate those water rights because they haven't been used for a long time, specifically for human use. The water is always there in the creek, but what happens is that because of what I mentioned of this compact from 1920s, that water needs to keep going, and I'm certainly not for holding the water here. I totally agree with how the water should be moving, but what we believe is that where the water is flowing through the landscape, it belongs to everything that's here, right? So it's there's a balance there between allowing the water to pass through, but also maybe be able to allow this water to naturally flow through the landscape and move with floodplains and all that. So what we were trying to do is basically reinstate this water right and be able to grow food on our land, and also make a habitat for, everything, including humans here. Um, and we're still in this process. It's a very long legal process, but we're finally actually going to present our case in the water court in June. A few of our neighbors have been opposing. We're hoping that we're down to one opposers at this point. We're negotiating with one of them. But at the end, it's going to be the water judge that decides. And unfortunately, if you've ever been in the legal system, everything costs a lot of money. So we actually, our budget to purchase the water and just put in an application in the court has been depleted 2 years ago. We spent over, $30,000 on just legal fees and engineering fees. And it's more than the water was worth, based on the prices that, the sellers established. So, yeah, we're really trying to put this water into a life, based use on this land, and be able to grow food and also create a habitat for everything that's around here. And the way that people can help us is to spread the word. We're really counting on people. There's nothing like some good pressure on our opposers just to show support for us. And we have proven that no one's gonna be hurt by us moving this water. We, whatever you want to say about calculations, but engineers calculated that no injury is gonna happen. But yeah, we're really open to working with others on this and making sure that we alleviate any issues that people might have with us moving this water. So, but at the end, yeah, we are gonna need some extra funds to be able to build some infrastructure and finish the pond in order to basically fulfill the requirements of the state for us to move this water upstream. And yeah, and pay the final lawyer fees, unfortunately, and the court fees. There is a GoFundMe page, and you can find it all on our website, wildcooperative.wordpress.com. There's a video there and a link to the GoFundMe page. And then anybody who is wanting to reach out and thinks of some other ways to basically find supporters for us, please reach out directly to us, and you can find the contact on our website.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing that story. It sounds like it's been quite the journey, but I hear at the core of that still that biocentric focus, right? Like that there's this biocentric relationship to that water and wanting to have that water nourish the land and nourish the beings there, the human and the non-human, and healthy habitat. And yeah, I appreciate your journey with all that, your fight, your battles, your ups and downs with that, because it's such an important thing, and it isn't easy to navigate this kind of strange world we have now of courts and laws and battles and lawyers and legal fees. Again, it's kind of like, I want to talk about the sort of ultimate version of that colonial mindset. You just get into all of the laws and the money and like how complicated it is to do something that seems so simple and vital and normal. And yeah, I am really supportive of people looking at ways to regenerate land and regenerate their relationship to all of the elements, and water being one of them. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that story today, Evelina. And what I'd love to do is you can send me, you've probably sent it to me before, but you can send me again the links to the GoFundMe, and we can, if you want to write something up, or we can write up something together, or maybe each write a little part. I'll put it out in my newsletter. It doesn't go out to that many people, but it does go out to over 1,000 people. So like, that's pretty cool. So, and maybe we can get some more support for this project as we go forward. So, yeah, and I think these are the things we're going to be having to navigate, all of us, in the next like 30 to 50 years. As these things get more and more challenging, more and more complicated, and when we have things happening in the Ukraine, battles and wars fought in Ukraine, and there's ripples that go out from that around fertilizer and food and all these things. And so I think we all need to be building those resilient relationships with our land, and the land we're connected to. And I love that you talk about it not as really as an ownership, but as a relationship. Well, before we wrap up for today, is there anything else you'd like to share or say to everybody?
Yeah, just what you mentioned, that our seeing the water as a source of life, right? And not just for us. And people can criticize how the water is used, but ultimately, we are gonna need some food, and all that food's gonna requires water. So being able to maintain that relationship, and kind of just understanding where the water comes from, how I can take care of the ecosystem that creates a healthy habitat for the water to flow and circulate and cycle through the planet. And then also, yeah, how it leaves our place, and where we're residing, and what is the quality of the water, how does it changes, how do we impact it, and how do we impact the habitat around it. So just being able to kind of, like we were talking about, a bigger picture, step back and always think of the water flowing back to the ocean, and then moving all around, underground or above ground or on the ground. Yeah, it's just, I love to always, come back to this idea that we're all connected. And this is really about, changing our culture, like we mentioned before, having this idea of, being connected to what happened before us and what's happening now and what's going to happen later, just having somewhat more of a larger perspective. And water is really crucial when it comes to that perspective, right? So step back and see what traditionally, how our relationship to water was formed, and how it formed us, how it formed our culture, before maybe we started thinking of the land differently, as more of a place to take, as opposed to a place to care for and give.
Yeah, I love that, Evelina. Thank you for bringing that to our awareness, that idea that there's nothing like water that helps us understand more how much we are connected, right? Like, just the way it flows through an ecosystem, the way it flows through our bodies, the way it is one of those ultimate symbols of connection. Obviously the air we breathe is another one, but we can't see it. But the water, we can see how it flows through systems and how important it is to everyone. So, and yeah, here's to us helping all of us help create a new culture around these things as we navigate the complex world we're in. Well, thanks for the time and energy today, Evelina. And yeah, I will, let's be in touch, and I'll put this together. Maybe we can send this out on Monday to everybody, or Tuesday or something early next week, so everybody can get this video and find out more where they can help out Wild Cooperative with this.